Hello and welcome. I'm Danny, and this is a special news bulletin from Hypnagogia's Wicked Mysterious. It's finally happening. This is very exciting news. Today we'll be discussing the UAP hearing held by Congress on November 13th, 2024. This is a follow-up to the previous coverage I did on the last congressional hearing, and I will leave that episode in the show notes if you want to listen to that one first, which I would highly recommend doing before you dive into this one, just to give you a little bit of background information. There will be no video today, though I will have some pictures up on YouTube, and we'll also do a screen share together to read some of the documentation. But I didn't get on video this time because it takes a lot more effort, and I wanted to get this out in front of you as soon as possible. So, with all of that out of the way, let's just dive right on in. The meeting opens with Representative and co-chair Nancy Mace, who explains that this is a joint hearing between two committees, one being the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovation, and the other is the Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs. Her opening statement explains that the goal is to stop the secrecy surrounding this phenomenon, and she quotes Army Colonel Carl Nell: "Non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new and has been ongoing. There are unelected people in the government that are aware of that." End quote. She says that there were certain individuals that did not want this hearing to take place and that she will make sure disclosure happens come hell or high water. As a reminder, these subcommittees are investigating secret knowledge and programs held by the federal government behind the backs of Congress. Congress now wants to know what knowledge, if any, the federal government has on extraterrestrial life and technology, and how many taxpayer dollars have been funded into these programs. Ms. Mace reminds us that the Pentagon has failed 6 out of 6 of these audits. She criticizes the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, for their lack of transparency, including information on budget and spending. We then hear opening statements from Mr. Garcia, who makes a great point that this topic is discussed in a way that is bipartisan. Both Democrats and Republicans can find common ground on these issues. I think that this is a very, very important point to highlight. The two-party system is incredibly divisive, which at this point feels almost purposeful. I've said for a very long time that if there were ever a threat from outside Earth, how quickly we would forget our differences. The divisions of political party, race, religion, nationality would all become a distant memory if we could just come together to find a common ground as the people of Earth. Mr. Garcia goes on to remind everyone that the investigation is based on fact and science, and this is where he makes the first mention of the potential that there are UAPs in our oceans. Next up is Mr. Grothman, who reviews last year's conference on the topic and highlights the documentation of UAPs congregating over military bases and the potentiality of national security risks. He says that he and most of the American people do not trust our federal government. Mr. Moskowitz has his opening remarks, which again include bipartisanship within the committee. He echoes the concerns of overclassification and mentions that they've been told not to ask the witnesses questions on specific topics. He brings up that cell phones have changed the game because now every single one of us has the ability to document our own evidence. The federal government can no longer gaslight us by calling witnesses crazy, or as Mr. Moskowitz puts it, just a guy living in a Winnebago. At this point, Chairwoman Mace enters a 12-page document into evidence that was brought in by Mr. Schellenberger, one of the witnesses. This document describes a secret government program called Immaculate Constellation. She also says that she was told if she says the words Immaculate Constellation, she will end up on a watch list. And to this she responds, "Come at me, bro." And the chamber erupts in laughter. This document is available online at mace.house.gov if you'd like to read it yourself. I will link it below in the show notes. And I'm going to read some of the key points of it together. If you want to follow along on YouTube, that's great. If not, you can just listen. I'm going to pay special attention to the types of craft and how they were observed. All right, here's the document. So I'm going to read some of the information that I highlighted, starting with the introduction. So It says this document is the result of a multi-year internal investigation into the subjects of UAP. The author obtained access to this information while pursuing their lawful duties as an employee of the Department of Defense. The results of this investigation are deeply disturbing. Elements of the U.S. executive branch have conspired to prevent the U.S. legislative branch from exercising its lawful powers of governance with respect to the UAP, TUO, and NHI issues. So, UAP is obviously unidentified anomalous phenomena. TUO is technology of unknown origin, and NHI is non human intelligence. The information provided by the author strongly suggests that the U.S. executive branch has been managing UAP NHI issues without congressional knowledge, oversight, or authorization for some time, quite possibly decades. Unambiguous evidence demonstrating the reality of UAP, NHI, and TUO have been made available to Congress by multiple independent UAP whistleblowers. So, Section 1, this is where they talk about the actual program itself, a special access program. Immaculate Constellation is an unacknowledged special access program, or USAP, established following the public disclosure of AATIP, AAWSAP programs by Luis Elizondo in 2017. Luis Elizondo was one of the witnesses in this conference today, so we will introduce him in a little bit. Immaculate Constellation's primary mission is collecting imagery intelligence on UAP or ARV or RV reproduction vehicles, utilizing tasked and untasked U.S. military intelligence resources. The Immaculate Constellation acts as a nexus for collecting, analyzing, and disseminating intelligence on the activities, capabilities, and locations of anomalous aerospace threats that originate from foreign or unidentified sources. The collection platforms involved are a blend of tasked and untasked capabilities in low Earth orbit, the upper atmosphere, military and civilian aviation altitudes, and maritime environments. Immaculate Constellation pays particular attention to anomalous aerospace platforms that have been developed through the study or acquisition of technologies of unknown origin by foreign nations or unknown entities. Moving on to Section 2, this is about the imagery intelligence. So it says the USG maintains, they call it, I don't know if it's IMINT or IMINT, which is imagery intelligence. The imagery intelligence collected from data sets available to the Department of Defense and reviewed for this report provide compelling evidence for UAP, which defy prosaic explanations. There are a large number of unique imagery sensors available to U.S. military and intelligence community, including infrared, forward-looking infrared, full-motion video, thermal, and still photography. The multitude of wavelengths collected by these sensors have captured UAP characteristics that are difficult or impossible to observe with the human eye alone. So cool. So it goes on to talk about the different types of formations that they're seeing. I don't know if I should read all of this, but just briefly, there's cuboid formations of metallic orbs, fast mover observed transitioning over sensitive facilities. Those are those orbs that they see, that they're saying that the cuboid formation and metallic orbs are seen over sensitive facilities. It also talks about the triangle ships that they've seen, large disc using clouds as concealment, boomerang UAP observed by a pilot in a sensor suite, jellyfish UAP that crosses the US-Mexico border. This one's interesting. It says there's footage of an irregularly shaped UAP flying across the southern border. It looks like a jellyfish or floating brain with hanging appendages in appearance. Interesting. Section 3, Defense Human Intelligence Reporting. Just to summarize, they're basically saying here that if they aggregated all these reports, we would have significant information on UAP. So this talks about the reporting process, how we don't have one currently for civilians and commercial airline pilots to report sightings, which we will again get more into in the congressional hearing section. And then this talks about common shapes observed. So there's sphere or orb, disc or saucer, oval or tic tac, triangle, boomerang or arrowhead, irregular or organic. And then I highly suggest, if you're listening on the podcast format, that you either watch this on YouTube or look in the show notes and look at this chart yourself. It's just too much to read here, but there's a chart that talks about the observable characteristics of each of these ships or UAPs and the details known about them. So, for example, the first one is sphere or orb. It talks about what it looks like and behaviors it has, and if there are any biological effects. For example, this sphere or orb one, for biological effects, it says close observers reported feelings of unease and of electronic device malfunctions. For the disc and saucer, it says there are visual disturbances such as shimmering air or a sudden fog formation. For the triangular ship, it says for biological effects, long-term psychological effects, anxiety, insomnia, the feeling of being watched, and shared awareness with the triangle UAP. So there's lots of information here. So moving on to section 5, it talks about restricted USG historical records. It says this serial number corresponds with an official NSA report published in 1978. The existence and content of this report was verified by accessing the appropriate intelligence archives. The substance of the report concerns scientific research in the Soviet Union in the topics of parapsychology, psi, and biological effects of UAP on human beings. So let's think about what was happening in 1978. If you haven't listened to the Ingo Swann episode, please do. It's just so fascinating. He is a psychic who they call him the father of remote viewing, but he didn't create remote viewing. He kind of just was born with this gift. And he, according to him, so we can't fact check this, but he thinks he was hired by the CIA. Whoever hired him, he didn't know who it was. It was a very secretive mission. He thinks it was the CIA. He was hired to create a training program for the military in the 70s that included what he called psi. And this was a training program to teach military how to remote view so that they could use it to spy on the Soviet Union and also to figure out what's going on in the cosmos, specifically the moon. So super interesting guy, super interesting story. He also had a lot of contact with UAPs or UFOs as they called it at the time. So again, another connection. We always just stumble upon these, but yeah, so parapsychology and psi, which is basically telepathy, basically is what psi is. Is the psi is the overarching, like the umbrella term for all sorts of psychic abilities. So it says this and other classified accounts provide a rare public glimpse, reveal. This is worded weirdly. I noticed there's actually a lot of typos in here, but I thought that was strange. But these and other classified accounts provide a rare public glimpse, reveal the contours of a secretive, decades-long competition between major terrestrial powers to collect, exploit, and field novel technologies derived from the study of UAP and NHI. So basically, it's saying that there's been a long competition between us and other countries on Earth to collect and then exploit these technologies that they find when studying UAP and NHI. So there's also this section 6, signals of intelligence. Foreign countries are known to have observed UAPs whose signatures and behaviors correlate to those observed by the United States. So other countries are seeing the same things that we are. It says these UAP events are treated by the security apparatuses of each state as a serious national security threat due to UAP proximity to sensitive military and intelligence facilities. We'll get into that more later about why why these UAPs are doing that. These facilities are most often associated with aerospace defense, strategic deterrence, and military-sponsored scientific research and development. On multiple occasions, each of these nations have attempted to intercept and shoot down UAPs violating their territorial airspace. Foreign countries have internal organizations dedicated to studying the ambiguous threat posed by UAPs, deducing scientific principles through observation, and the careful management of public perceptions of the UAP issue. So it's not just us, it's not just the United States doing this. Other countries in the world are not only witnessing this, but recording it and then managing public perception. Section 6, conclusion. The official disclosure of the existence of NHI and their presence on Earth is a pivotal moment in human history. The nature of this information is of such incomparable relevance to the public good that it demands to be shared. Some people may object and say that disclosure at this time poses too many risks. To them, it must be said that we will never be able to predict how individuals, families, communities, and nations will react to revelations of such magnitude. Wow. Just wow. The good of humanity will always triumph through time, and it is moments of crisis that our capacities for achieving the extraordinary are discovered. Be not afraid. I have chills. Just incredible stuff. All right, so now they introduce the panel of witnesses. They raise their hands and they are oathed in. The witnesses are Dr. Tim Gallaudet, who is a retired U.S. Navy admiral, and he is CEO of Ocean STL Consulting. Mr. Luis Elizondo, who is referenced in that report that we just read. He's an author of UAP books and a former Department of Defense official. Michael Gold is a former NASA Associate Administrator of Space Policy and Partnerships and is a member of NASA UAP Independent Study Team. And Mr. Michael Schellenberger, he's a journalist and co-founder of the California Peace Coalition. Mr. Gallaudet, a retired admiral and CFO of Ocean STL, starts his opening remarks. He says he was informed of the confirmed existence of UAPs in 2015 when he was serving as the commander of the Navy Meteorology and Oceanography Command. He explains that he was doing an exercise along the coast of the Atlantic Ocean when he received an urgent email. It asked if anyone knew what these objects were because they were involved in numerous near collisions with Air Force. There was a video attached, which is now known as the Go Fast video. And fun fact, To the Stars, which was co-founded by Tom DeLonge, was the first to receive a copy of this video and made it publicly available. There is a link to the Go Fast video in the show notes. So this flying object in the video exhibited flight patterns that defy physics as we know them, prompting the emailer to ask if anyone knew of any classified test flying, but nobody did. In fact, classified testing must never occur at the same time as other military exercises. And the next day, the email was gone from Dr. Gallaudet's account and from the accounts of the other recipients. He explains that part of his job duties include assessing risks to military exercises, which this event clearly did, but it was largely ignored and swept under the rug. He acknowledges continued secrecy from the federal government, where footage has still not been shared with top-ranking officials or Congress. He acknowledges the disinformation campaign by which the government threatens whistleblowers. He says he feels a personal drive to show moral leadership and wants to validate the credibility of the brave whistleblowers who have already come forward. Mr. Elizondo has his opening remarks where he confirms that UAP are real and that they are of advanced technology that no nation in the world has, and that they are monitoring sensitive military installations. He worked for the White House and National Security Council, where he ran a secret program. He says that the secrecy and stovepiping became much worse after 9/11, and that the success of this country relies in part on an informed public. He states that these programs go above and beyond just to hide the fact that we are not alone in the cosmos, which was his direct quote. He seconds the intimidations and threats to his life that the federal government has engaged in. Next up, Mr. Schellenberger says that Obama and Trump have both acknowledged that the government has information on extraterrestrial life that it is hiding from Congress. He says that the existence of UAPs doesn't necessarily equate to confirmation of extraterrestrial life and that there are alternative theories. This could be naturally occurring phenomena that we don't yet understand, like plasma or ball lightning, or that it could be a much more simple answer, such as drones, CGI, a hoax, or birds. And to this, you can see Mr. Elizondo laugh and shake his head. But his point is that the public still needs to know what it is that the government knows or doesn't know, and that secrecy without congressional oversight is against the law. He states different types of UAPs seen, including orbs, saucers, boomerang shapes, and more, and notes the federal government's recent increase into denying FOIA requests. He goes on to explain the perversion of exemptions to the Freedom of Information Act, such as stating that there is an active investigation or providing documents that are so heavily redacted they become useless. Information being redacted is sometimes just data that has no relevance to sensitive information or ongoing investigations. He claims that they will deny something on Monday and admit it by Friday. Mr. Gold's opening statements discuss the courage of the committees and whistleblowers alike. He held a leadership position at NASA and feels strongly that information should be acquired in the name of science. He talks about combating the stigma of the mere interest in UFOs and that academics have been mocked, ridiculed, and threatened for simply asking questions. He suggests creating an AI program that can search through NASA's databases for UAP to find answers. He mentions the lack of a UAP reporting database for commercial pilots, which was a central topic in last year's hearing. Miss Mace starts with her questions. She asks about a disc shaped object known as the button, recorded in 2017, but Dr. Gallaudet is unable to disclose much information in a public setting. This part goes pretty fast because she is very direct with her questioning and asks for succinct yes or no answers. Mr. Elizondo confirms that there are U.S. crash retrieval programs and that these programs seek to reverse engineer these crashed ships. These programs go as far as placing employees on paid leave if they're injured by one of these crafts. Moving on to Mr. Schellenberger, she asks about Immaculate Constellation. He says the mission is to document UAPs and that they are in possession of potentially thousands of high quality resolution photos and videos. Mr. Moskowitz asks Mr. Gold why witnesses are victims of retribution or ridicule. He explains that there is a natural conservatism about new ideas going all the way back to Galileo. He asks Mr. Elizondo about a document he signs, and he states that it is stored in a skiff and was given to him by the Department of Defense. This document prevents him from speaking about the crash retrieval program. And Mr. Moskowitz points out that you can't talk about Fight Club if there is no Fight Club, meaning how can somebody be sworn to secrecy if the program doesn't actually exist, according to the DoD? Mr. Elizondo's background is heavily discussed to point out that he is an extremely reliable witness. He is asked if he was allowed to not sign this document or have a lawyer review it before he did so, and he explains, not really, no. There was an implied threat that he had to sign it, essentially because the document alone confirms these secret programs. Moving on to Dr. Gallaudet, Mr. Moskowitz asks about the Omaha incident. This incident involves the USS Omaha, a Navy combat ship. In July 2019, off the coast of California, the USS Omaha and other naval ships recorded footage of a UAP flying into the ocean. Nearby submarines searched for the object and never found it. Again, I will leave a link of this video in the description box. Now it's Mr. Grothman's turn for questioning. No real new information here, but he does ask Mr. Elizondo if there's evidence that there is more UAP activity surrounding sensitive military sites versus, say, a normal commercial airport. This is confirmed that there is some sort of relationship between UAP activity and these sensitive sites, including nuclear equities in Department of Energy sites, and that there has been for decades. The first two witnesses are asked why the Pentagon would withhold 20-year-old information from Congress, and they both speculate that the Pentagon doesn't want to admit to Congress that they don't know what these things are and that they don't have a solution for vulnerabilities in our airspace. Mr. Burchett asks Mr. Alonso how he would classify UAP phenomena, and he reiterates again that no known country has this technology, and if they did, it would eclipse the intelligence failure of 9/11 by a magnitude. They talk about a spokesperson for the Pentagon who is a psychological operations officer, and that they are the only point of contact for questions about UAP or UAP events. Mr. Alonso explains that this person has a history of providing false or misleading information to the media just to discredit these stories. Dr. Gallaudet describes the UAPs entering the ocean and says that they move faster than any manned vehicle we have currently available. Mr. Higgins asks Mr. Alonso about the types of crafts: spheres, orbs, discs, and saucers, oval or tic tac, triangular shape, boomerang or arrowhead, and irregular or organic. He says that yes, they may be from different origins, and he references the report where it states that some of these crafts, in particular, the spheres and orbs, triangular and the irregular or organic, have biological effects. So we talked about this when we went over the report, but some of these effects are feelings of unease, electronic devices malfunctioning, long term anxiety and insomnia, the feeling of being watched, and a shared awareness with the craft itself. And the triangular shape is mentioned there. He reads from the article that the irregular or organic UAP types can cause psychological stress, feelings of hot or cold, and phantom smells. Mr. Schellenberger explains that his understanding is that these experiences are documented by a large amount of data from multiple decades. This data may also be housed at the White House. Mr. Frost, who is also part of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, asks Mr. Gold some questions, and he reiterates that there's a treasure trove of data that NASA has and that they just need the encouragement to look into it. He discusses sensor bias, which is that they actually don't know how many UAP events are taking place over civilian areas. The sheer volume of data involving UAP over military sites could just be due to the amount of monitoring that's done there. They reiterate again that they're not collecting data from commercial pilots and civilians. And Mr. Frost brings up that he has toured a government facility in which they explained to him that certain hangars are rented out by other private companies and that they do not know what goes on inside these hangars. Mr. Gold advises Congressman Frost that NASA lacks the instruments and the funding to properly and scientifically investigate UAPs, and that cockpit and cell phone cameras just do not suffice. Congresswoman Luna asks about hotspots where UAP may enter or exit the ocean, and Dr. Gallaudet says he doesn't have any sufficient information to say that that's true. She then asks Mr. Alonso if these ships could be piloted by some mind body connection. He says that yes, they are able to anticipate our maneuvers and often stalk our naval ships. She asks him if these are interdimensional beings, and he says he's not able to speculate on that. However, the human body cannot withstand instantaneous acceleration. In fact, we don't even have materials that can withstand instantaneous acceleration. She asks if these ships could be alive themselves, and Mr. Alonso says he cannot say yes on record because science's definition of what alive means is always evolving. I just want to pause here for a second just to discuss briefly the idea that some of these extraterrestrial ships are themselves alive. The next episode that I have coming out for you guys is about the Pleiadians. And there is a theory that Pleiadians pilot bioships, which are made of organic material and are co piloted by collective Pleiadian consciousness. This episode is going to be out, I think it's December 5th, 2024, but it is available right now if you subscribe to my email list. And that's my website at hypna-gogia.com, hypna-gogia.com. And you'll also have access to episodes as soon as they're edited before the public gets them if you sign up on Patreon. So again, those links are in the bio. You do get kind of one free pre-release episode the first time you sign up on my email list. So anyway, I do talk about that in the next episode. So it's kind of weird that this came up in the UAP hearing. So more on that next month, or feel free to get it early. But anyway, So Miss Luna is the one doing the questioning, and I think she's my absolute favorite because she asks the questions that I would ask if I was on this panel. She asks, quote, "Do any of you ever come across reports from people that claim to have firsthand experiences with these entities, whatever they might be, or these aircraft, and then as a result of whether or not they are religious, find that these will automatically disappear?" So, just to break that down a little bit and talk about again Pleiadians, there is an idea, according to people who have channeled these beings, that you have to be vibrating at a certain frequency. You have to be attuned to it. So there's an idea that if you're religious, maybe you're not at the right frequency to receive this information. Though I guess there could be a case you could argue about angels and people that see Mary and Jesus and all that stuff. But I think the point is here that if you have a religion and you're set on that and that is your belief, you're now unable to see anything else that's occurring because your beliefs don't align with that, and then therefore your vibration doesn't align with it, right? So I think that's what she's getting at. Unfortunately, I'll get into it, but that question doesn't get answered. But Mr. Alonso says that he was more focused on the mechanics of the ship and not the pilots. Miss Luna follows up with, "It seems like based on our conversations that we've had people that say there are good and bad of whatever these things are. And so my concern from a national security perspective is, A, is that true? B, are you guys hearing the reports of that? And C, I think moving forward in regards to technology, Mr. Gold, some of these aircraft seem like they're operating off energy that we don't currently have. If we are able to obtain that, would that impact humanity for the better or for the negative?" End quote. And Mr. Gold says that it is a national security threat if other countries have access to this technology and we don't. Unfortunately, they didn't answer the other questions asked, which was disappointing. But again, part of the reason for this hearing is so that the public can hear what types of questions this oversight committee is asking. So that's a good thing. Even if it's happening behind closed doors, hopefully we can get answers on that soon in the next coming months or years. Mr. Garcia is up next. He asks if the federal government is knowingly concealing information from the public, to which they all say yes. He then asks the witnesses, in their own opinion, what are UAPs? Mr. Gallaudet says non human intelligence. Mr. Alonso agrees. Mr. Schellenberger says he genuinely doesn't know. And Mr. Gold says he doesn't know, but we must find out. Mr. Biggs asks Dr. Gallaudet about the Go Fast event and the email being deleted. And he asks, for what purpose are the feds overclassifying this information? Mr. Elizondo says again that this knowledge became known to the federal government during the Cold War, and they at first didn't want to tip off the Soviet Union about what they were seeing. But then the main reason became that they just can't admit that they don't have a solution. Mr. Burleson asks Mr. Alonso if the federal government is in possession of this technology. They discuss the transfer of technology found in the 1950s, and that transfer was blocked by the CIA. He explains that he was informed of both biological material as well as technological material in possession, specifically bodies, before Mr. Elizondo was even born. He asks if there have been any communication with any non human life form, and he said yes, but not verbal. He said that the communication is by intent. So he means that these beings want to be seen. It can be inferred that they want it to be known that they're capable of interacting with our nuclear capabilities. Mr. Timmons asks if it is increasingly often that UAPs are seen, and Mr. Elizondo said maybe. It could be an increase in frequency, or maybe our technology to record this and our awareness has just evolved. They want to make sure what their intent is because they really have no idea. Ms. Bobert has her 5 minutes to speak. And this is an important part. So she makes a kind of funny joke that kind of falls somewhat flat. And unfortunately, now it's being used across social media as a direct confirmation. She says at first something to the effect of, speaking of being on lists, referring to what was said earlier about even uttering the words Immaculate Constellation puts you on a list. So she was making a joke about being on a list. And she said, quote, may as well go out and say it. The earth is flat, birds are government drones, and we've never set foot on the moon. Joe Biden received 81 million votes in the 2020 election. So she delivers this line totally deadpan, which is what makes it kind of funny, but she's totally being facetious here. She asks about a secret government project about manipulation of human genetics with non human genetics to potentially create hybrids. That was not a joke. But none of the witnesses can confirm that this has happened. And they discuss the oceanic UAPs outlined in the report about Immaculate Constellation and that they defy our current understanding of physics. Mr. Elizondo confirms that certain government contractors collect recovered technology. For example, General Dynamics might collect UAP with underwater capability, and Lockheed Martin might collect UAP found in aerospace, though there is some overlap between contractors and the type of technology they work with. Ms. Mace asks some pointed questions. How would you define non human intelligence? What are we actually talking about? Admiral Gallaudet says that we are probably dealing with a higher order of intelligence, non human intelligence, based on the size of our universe and the diversity of life that could exist. Mr. Elizondo says that whatever this is, quote, would be the ability to react to a stimulus in a manner that requires an intellectual thought process. Mr. Schellenberger again says he doesn't know. And Mr. Gold says we're looking for intelligence that could be biological or not, and that non biological intelligence would be something like AI, which is also super interesting to consider. Mr. Ogles is the last to ask questions. He asks Mr. Elizondo why these UAP may be interested in particular areas. And his response is that these locations are the origination of new technologies, so that it could be foreign countries watching these locations, and that it seems like these places are under surveillance and monitoring by UAPs. Dr. Gallaudet says that these UAPs are threatening and risking safety to pilots and to military personnel. Congressman Ogles makes it a point that if the federal government has this technology that Congress needs to know, they are afraid that it can be used against us either by other worldly forces or other countries. He says that hiding this information from Congress is criminal, and this is met with applause. So, with this, the subcommittee is adjourned. So, I hope that came out well. I hope I summarized that for you without missing too many points. So, my personal feelings on this, I want to believe that these members of Congress are doing their job and that this is our checks and balances system working as it should. But if you know anything about Project Bluebeam, our own government, whether it be Congress or someone else, publicly admitting the existence of UAPs is kind of concerning. I want to believe that we're on the precipice of this great awakening and that our government, Congress in particular, is following suit by bringing light to what many already knew, the existence of non human intelligence here on Earth. But Project Bluebeam is a conspiracy theory. And I'll say conspiracy theory just because we don't have solid proof that it is true, but it claims that there's a government project involving NASA that simulates the second coming of Christ using advanced simulation technology, which obviously we already have. The purpose of this would be to come together with a new religion and a new world order. And the purpose of these congressional hearings is to instill the public's trust in our government by releasing whatever information they can on UAPs, provided that it doesn't compromise national security. So, what better way to prepare the public to believe something like this than to be spoon fed with information coming from a congressional committee themselves? The general public is more likely to believe a simulated event in the sky if our very own government has already admitted to the existence and cover up of extraterrestrial technology. Though they don't outright admit that this is the case, it is strongly implied because it's stated numerous times that no country in the world has this technology and that it defies physics as we know it. So, even though I do think that what we're seeing is a genuine inquest into uncovering the truth, I do have to take what any part of our government says with a massive spoonful of salt. I would assume that this board has reviewed the CIA documentation of all the known contactees who have stated exactly why these UAPs or beings are watching us. I am aware that the purpose of these inquests are to access data for scientific study, and channeled information is not scientific by any means. But this information comes from numerous sources, including contactees, remote viewers, ancient civilizations, and psychics who have all been able to connect with collective consciousness and or specific consciousness of extraterrestrial beings. It's my belief that these beings piloting these ships are here to guide humanity's evolution. They're seen over military bases because they know what goes on there and they're protecting us from destroying ourselves and the planet. They have the ability to make themselves known or not using vibrations compatible or incompatible with human eyesight. Therefore, they want us to know that they're there and they want us to know they exist. The impact of this acknowledgement is by far one of the most exciting moments in history and will change the trajectory of humanity. That's just my personal opinion, though. I'm not saying I'm right, but I do hope that I am. And this is truly an extraordinary time to be alive, boys and girls. So that's all I've got for you. I hope you enjoyed this very special episode. Don't forget to check out the videos. I linked them for you in the episode notes, and head on over to my website, hypna-gaja.com, and get next month's pre-release episode. So with that, I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you again soon.